my topic will be on Hungry for Change, advancing agroecology and food sovereignty. And I really like to wish everyone a happy Earth Day. And I would like to thank the host, the Council on Green Revolution, who invited me to speak in this webinar, and Dr. Narasimha for suggesting my name. So thank you very much. And I'm very happy to be here to share some of the work that we are doing. Next slide, please. Okay. One of the things that has come out because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the all the different agencies of the UN, for example, the World Food Programme has warned that because of the COVID-19, the crisis threatens to push another 130 million people to the brink of a famine. And you must understand that famines and hunger and malnutrition is a crisis of food distribution and poverty, and not really of food production. In fact, if you look at the food production, there's overproduction, and that is why you hear of stories where farmers have left tomatoes to rot in the fields, or the Europeans dumping milk in the sea. So there is an overproduction. But it's not going to the people who really need it, and I will touch on some of that reasons. So even before the pandemic, there are about 821 million chronically hungry people, and 6 out of every 10 of them are Asians. So even though Asia is one of the top food producers and exporters, but we have a global, we have the number of food insecure population more than half compared to the global numbers. So when so before COVID-19 hit, you have this production, a capitalist production that has intensified and entrenched hunger for the world's poor through policies on food and agriculture. Next slide, please. So what has happened during the lockdown? We are seeing loss of lives and livelihoods and the erosion of people's rights. So 1.6 billion workers in the informal sector, nearly half the global workforce, stand immediate danger of losing their livelihoods. And this is coming from ILO. And worse, what's happening now is that throughout the region in Asia, we're finding that governments are using the pandemic to push for more corporate control and profits, even using human rights violations. And one of the problem countries is the Philippines. As of now, there are 325 documented killings of peasants, farm workers, and fisherfolk related to land dispute cases, and people who have advocate for agrarian reform. And these numbers actually have increased if you look at political prisoners. And that is, I think, one of the key problems that we are seeing as the Philippines invites more investments in the country and opening the countries to big corporations, agribusinesses to come in. So in India, even now, you can see that last year we heard, and there was so much of protest last year when the government was trying to remove laws that safeguard workers' wages, benefits, and safety. And in October, there was a major protest, which is still going on, against the farm laws that impacts farmers and the public distribution system. So consumers, poor consumers, are also affected. In Indonesia, the government pushed through the omnibus law, and this is really detrimental to the lower and middle class workers. It removes all safeguards in terms of wages, safety, benefits, etc. And it has also poised to damage the environment, because it has reduced or removed environmental assessment before projects are approved. So, and you can see the huge protests in Indonesia. This is from Jakarta, and they are protesting against the omnibus law. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, where you really cannot have a good, continued protests and campaign, the Indonesian government just pushed through this law in the parliament. Moving on, next one. So what has happened is that the policies basically, if you look at neoliberal policies and government policies, national policies, that have actually intensified social and economic injustices. So you have a historical oppression of marginalized rural communities. And this can be even traced back to colonial times, but it has intensified during the agreements under the World Trade Organization, where the North and the South, there was a big divide. If you remember the protests, even of governments against this WTO and some of the agreements, especially the agreement on agriculture and the one that basically pushed for the patent laws, for patents to be recognized. And so this was a process that even the World Bank and the IMF and other multilateral credit agencies has been pushing this, either through structural adjustment programs or through the PRSP, which is the poverty reduction programs. If you look at the AOA, the Agreement on Agriculture, it allows agricultural dumping. So the North is now dumping their overproduction in the South, and our farmers and our small businesses cannot actually compete, and so a lot of people are losing jobs and their livelihoods, and all countries in Asia have become export dependent on export to survive, and very little investments in agriculture, especially if it is intended for domestic food. Land grabs is happening. Huge hectares of land has been grabbed, and China. If you look at Asia, China is one of the big land grabbers recently. But you will find that all European countries and the US have been doing that systematically. Either it's through mining, or it's for big plantations. Then you have the neoliberal policies that denationalize food and food production, distribution, and consumption. And COVID-19 actually has further intensified the social and economic injustices. And one of the things in our area of focus, which is pesticide, and we've been fighting for the elimination of the highly hazardous pesticides in food and agriculture. One of the things that some countries like Thailand, they were trying to ban glyphosate or Roundup, which is identified as a potential or a possible human carcinogen by the International Agency on Research on Cancers. So they tried to ban it last year, but the US came down very hard and said, you cannot do this. Of course, they were putting pressure on Thailand, and finally Thailand rescinded. So you can see that even when governments are trying to safeguard the health of people and the environment, there is the other countries like US pushing for them to not do that, and basically safeguard the US corporations and their big businesses. Moving on, next slide, please. So the current food crisis, so it's a question of, in terms of food availability, because of the COVID-19, there were supply chain disruptions, production curtailments, because suddenly, we were all on lockdown and people were not even allowed to go and farm. and then, then slowly things change, but still things are more difficult. How do you do social distancing if you're a fisher folk, or social distancing if you're doing harvesting? And then pest and climate related problems do crop up. Then you have the food excess, volatility of food prices, because it's going up and down as and the farm law actually allows the hoarding. That's a potential for the farm law to allow hoarding, and that was one of the major problems in terms of volatility of food prices during the food crisis. If you remember 2008, 2009, and until 2012, this was every country was going through a food crisis. Then, of course, the loss of income, impediments to humanitarian food aid, because everybody was on lockdown, so there was transportation was a problem, planes were not flying, and then the falling farm gate prices in certain cases. The next slide, please. So who profits? And this is something that ETC Pat Mooney, he put this together in I think it was 2015. And you can see that a few companies, big transnational corporations. So if you look at seeds, you can go to this document actually on the web. It's free, and you can get a better view on this. But if you look at seeds, 67% is controlled by top four companies. If you look at the pesticides, 70% is being controlled by top four companies, and most of them are either from Europe or I think most of them are Europe, because Monsanto has been bought over by Bayer. So Bayer, Syngenta, Corvita, which is still US, Corvita and BSF. So those are the top four. Although some of the Indian companies are, being growing faster than others. Fertilizers, 18%. Are controlled by top five. And you can see that the concentration of power is with these corporations. And if you look at, again, the pesticide issue, we just released a group called Public Eye in Switzerland, published a report on how Syngenta, that the producer of paraquat, basically was falsifying data for the regulators. And this is so systematic that they have done, but somehow Public Eye was able to get some of the documents and show that this Syngenta has been falsifying data and saying that it's safe from 1970s. And if you check the paraquat papers, if you Google, you will find those. There's a very good report. Moving on, next slide. So this is what's happening. Even the Gates and Syngenta foundations are pushing the public research through the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research. And the UN-led World Food System Summit is also hijacking the summit's agenda, and it's a corporate agenda, because you have Guterres, the UN the Secretary General, has now basically asked Agnes Kalibata, who is from AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, and the world to be the main person for the WFSS, and World Economic Forum is now pushing the agenda, which is a very corporate agenda. They're talking about digitalization, GMOs, genetically modified organisms, industrial agriculture, without even talking about agroecology and other more positive things. And we know that the Alliance for Green Revolution, after so many years, there's been no positive outcome, and reports are coming out now about the lack of progress in Africa. And so even in the Philippines, you find that you have this Department of Agriculture calling Plant program, which is distributing rice and corn seeds and pesticides to farmers. Um, and they get hooked, and then they have to go to the back to the um, market to buy these seeds. Malaysia, where I come from, they are also pushing high-tech farming. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, the corporations, CropLife, has been pushing this agenda with the Malaysian government. Next slide, please. So why then we now have to talk about what are the solutions. And so I just want to identify a few things, and one of the key elements that we feel is very important is the food sovereignty, because first of all we have to start from who produces our food. And small scale food producers produce 70% of the total global food production, and this is a UNEP data. And 450 million laborers work on industrial plantations and farms. So there's a huge numbers of people who are actually involved in agriculture. And Asia is an agrarian society, so we are changing, but majority are still from the rural areas. So moving on, next slide. I'll try to finish this so that I can have more questions to be asked. Next slide, please. So what is people's food sovereignty? It's really for the rights of community and peoples to decide their own food and agriculture policy. So it's not the government, it's not the WTO, it's not the World Bank, but people on the ground and the small food producers who have to be part of the process to decide their own food and agriculture policy. Uphold peasants' right to land and productive resources, because without land, it's very difficult to be a farmer, to produce food, and also to have seeds, because seeds is also very necessary. It's to own and to share, to conserve and to select and breed. Right to food for all is another concept. Right to produce sustainably, and that's where we push for agroecology. And I think it's the best way forward for food production. And of course, rights of women, because women, hold more than half the sky. Women have been the main food producers in many of our communities, ensuring livelihoods and fair prices for farmers and farming communities, rights of workers for fair wages, health and safety ensured. Moving on, next slide, please. Okay, just to share some of our campaigns. So we have the PAN-EP campaign on food rights now, which is it's also looking at the impact of COVID-19 on rural people, on food producers, but it's a whole both the documentation, campaign, and advocacy for agrarian reform, genuine agrarian reform. And this is our website, so please feel free to check us out. Then we have a campaign on protecting children from toxic pesticides, and children are actually bearing the brunt of the poisons that we are using in agriculture. We are spraying, it's going everywhere, and there are many cases where children continue to be affected. Then the campaign to phase out highly hazardous pesticides in agriculture by 2030 and ban HHPs in India, which is something that Dr. Narasimha and others, Pan India and Tunnel and many other groups are working to try to get rid of some of the HHPs in India. And I also wanted to touch base on the People's Summit on Food Systems. And this is our counter summit to the World the UN-led summit. So we wanted to counter that because we felt that we need to have a much more stronger response from the people and the small food producers and all of us, rather than the corporations talking and pushing their own agenda. And the People Summit on Food Systems, I think, is also very important because it's sharing agroecological practices. It's all the solutions that people on the ground are doing. And we hope that some of the governments also can join us, because it's not just, a summit for it's actually summit for all of us. And after this webinar, actually, I will be moderating another session where we're launching the People Summit on Food Systems overall. And this will be starting point from now till September, when the actual UN World Food Summit, Food System Summit will happen. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just to say a bit more about the what this People's Food Summit, Global People's Summit on Food System is all about. It's really for us moving towards a just, equitable, and sustainable food system that serves the interests and needs of the people and the planet first, above profits. Moving on. So please join us. If you can't join us today, we will make sure that we share the website and the social media platforms. So we strengthen people's resistance to build and to build alternatives. So basically, genuine agrarian reform, support agroecology, workers' rights, and ensure decent living wages and end to contractualization. Ensure women's rights and empowerment, stop violations of human rights everywhere, and the caste system and feudalism and imperialism. Let's be for people's rights and for small food producers. Next slide, please. Thank you very much. I'll end here.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And we'll see if you have any questions, then you could answer them. So here, one of them was asking what type of implements taken to save the earth for this Earth Day.
Yes. So what we're doing is that we believe that agroecology and food sovereignty actually will safeguard the earth. Because the system is, because pesticides pollute the environment, fertilizers pollute the environment, and also people. So it's not just the earth, but also human health is affected very badly. If you look at the pesticide poisoning human health, we just came out with a report that shows 385 million people are being affected or being poisoned every year due to pesticide. So it's a huge number, 385 million every year. So and also causes death. But the environment cannot sustain food production if you destroy the earth, if you destroy the soil. And so the whole push now is to ensure that the soil is fertile by composting, by doing all sorts of things, but not putting chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So I think what PAN has been doing is really to protect the earth and to protect the people's health and the environment. So that's what we are doing. By launching the People's Food System Summit today, we are also getting people to understand that the earth is very important. That without the earth and the planet, we don't have life as humans, and as people and so yes, thank you for that question.
Yeah, another question is what would be the alternatives to pesticides which would be eco-friendly?
Well, that's actually difficult because most of the pesticides are meant to kill or poison, basically to get rid of insects and animals and other organisms. So it's a poison. So what we need to do is to move away from pesticides, but you could use some natural pesticides like neem, and India is very good at developing the neem as pest control. There's also the also so other natural materials that can be done. Like some people have used chili, some have used what do you call garlic, and so there's many ways to do it. But the key is not to uh, think of pest control as much as improving the soil, because if the soil is healthy and fertile, the plant is and of course the seeds are also you know um, are able to sustain, and so the with the seeds and the fertile soil, the plant can be very strong and able to withstand some of the pests coming in. So there are many other methods of, if you look at agroecology in terms of doing crop rotation, making sure that you plant in all the legumes to fertilize the soil. So there's a whole kind of learning exchange that's going on, and that's something that PAN has been very much involved in, doing this learning exchanges on agroecology. So if you check the website again, there are a lot of videos on how you can grow food, even in your small garden or on your balcony, in terms of agroecologically.
Yeah, there are two relevant questions, madam, especially related to organic farming, why it is not rapidly being implemented in country, means I mean to say in all the countries. Other.
Why it's because many things. One is, when uh, the green revolution took place in the 70s, farmers were actually forced to use the high yielding varieties, or what I call the high input varieties, where you need pesticides and fertilizers for the seeds to germinate and to grow. So people were actually forced, farmers were forced. And if you know farmers, they are slow to take on new ideas and new things. They have to be shown that this works. But the policies that were instilled and implemented and by enforced, like in Indonesia during the 70s and the 80s, during the time of Suharto, people were not allowed to use their own seeds. They have to use the high yielding varieties. And so if not, you can be arrested and jailed, and so it was a forced thing to use this, and people got caught up in the cycle of using pesticides, high yielding varieties and fertilizers. And so then people started to get hooked. It's a kind of addiction in that sense. And now when you want to move to organic, you have to have a change, and not many scientists are supporting that. There's a slow change for sure, but one, it is people still worry, oh my, there will be pest attack, so it's more difficult now to convince farmers, because there's no more subsidies, there's nothing, no, there's no even research. So it's going from farmer to farmers exchanges. Some NGOs are doing that, some institutions, but it's very small efforts. And I think that's why organic farming has not moved. But with the COVID-19, we are seeing that at least in Malaysia and Thailand, that more people are actually buying organic. And it's a bit more expensive, I acknowledge that, because farmers have to also survive. And so the whole food distribution system is difficult for them, because they have to isolate and get the organic products to the market. But we hope that more and more, as more and more people start to buy organic, it's coming down. And of course, grow your own organic food in your garden or in your homestead or in your homes.
Probably last question, madam. This is very much relevant to the next speaker also. That is regarding the soil fertility management, including restoring our soils and microbial life and all that. How do we do that?
Well, I think first of all, don't use chemicals. I mean, that's the bottom line. But there's a lot of learnings actually, understanding the soil, the composition, putting organic matter into the soil. Microorganisms. So earthworm, vermiculture is so important. So sometimes it feels like we're going backwards, but actually those are things that have worked for farmers in the past, and soil fertility is important. If you're talking about moving and switching to agroecology, it's much easier to do. So I think for me, the soil is one of the key element for change that is required if we are moving to a more sustainable, more planet, kind of a situation where we are supporting the planet and we are protecting the environment, and in the consequently we also support our health. So I think the soil is really the beginning. Seeds and then soil, I think those are the two most important if you're talking about moving forward in terms of agroecology.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam, for your valuable time and addressing on the most important issues. And you have given us a way how to network and on the causes and issues, how to bring the larger consensus globally. And your efforts are very much appreciated. And Dr. Donti Narasimha from India is representing your initiatives in India.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
definitely we'll see how we could work together on this mission for a better earth. Thank you very much, madam, once again.